Here's a question which has baffled everyone. Why did the Boeing 787 Dreamliner's safety systems fail? The answers lie in terabytes of digital clues now.
Recorded on two small but tough black boxes, this data extraction has now been successfully completed. Here's a report on what air crash investigators have to look through.
Well, the data has been recovered, and that's the reason why we have this huge, big breaking news story. Not only has it been recovered, it is now being analyzed by Indian investigators and also the US National Transport Safety Board.
On the noon of June 12, 2025, Air India Flight AI 171 prepared for departure from Ahmedabad's Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. The scheduled takeoff time was 1:10 p.m., but the flight was delayed and finally left the loading bay at 1:30 p.m. This aircraft was not new to service. Just hours before, it had flown from Paris to Delhi, and then from Delhi to Ahmedabad. The flight was bound for London Gatwick and carried a total of 242 people. The captain, Sumit Sabharwal, had 8,200 hours of flying experience, while the co-pilot, Cleve Kunder, had 1,100 hours. And as the aircraft was being refueled, passengers boarded. The refueling took 42 minutes, a little longer than the usual 30 to 35 minutes. But officials said this was not unusual for a flight with a maximum payload. But before takeoff, a passenger named Akash Vatsa noticed several problems inside the plane. The air conditioning was not working properly, the entertainment system and remote controls were not functioning, and the wing flaps seemed to be moving up and down in an odd way. He recorded a video and shared it on social media, showing that many passengers were uncomfortable due to the lack of air conditioning. At 1:31 p.m., the aircraft started moving towards the active runway. By 1:34, it was cleared by air traffic control for takeoff. The final pre-flight checks were completed at 1:38.24 p.m. There were no warning signs at the stage, no requests for runway changes, thrust modifications, or flap adjustments. The weather was hot, with a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, but visibility was good and conditions were within operational limits. At 1:38.44 p.m., the plane took off from runway 23. The airport is only one runway and is surrounded by residential areas. Just seconds after takeoff, the aircraft reached an altitude of 625 feet and a top speed of 174 knots. However, the landing gear was still extended, which is not normal. Usually, pilots retract the landing gear immediately after takeoff to reduce drag and help the plane climb efficiently. A 17-year-old named Aryan, who lived near the airport, was filming the takeoff from his rooftop. His video captured the plane flying unusually low with its landing gear still down. At 1:38.55 p.m., the aircraft stopped climbing and started to lose altitude. Only 34 seconds after takeoff at 1:39.13 p.m., the pilots issued a Mayday call. Mayday, no thrust, not taking lift. This message indicated a catastrophic loss of engine power or thrust. The plane then crashed into the residential quarters of BJ Medical College, less than 1.5 kilometers from the runway, and burst into flames. Inside the hostel canteen, about 35 students were having lunch. The crash happened so suddenly that many students jumped out of windows to escape the fire. The impact was so severe that people nearby felt the ground shake as if there had been an earthquake. When they rushed outside, they saw smoke, fire, and debris everywhere. Out of all the people on board, only one passenger survived, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, who is a British citizen sitting in seat 11A near an emergency exit. He managed to escape because the part of the plane he was in landed in an open area, allowing him to jump out. The other side of the plane was blocked by a wall, trapping everyone else inside. The official death toll has not been announced, but it is estimated that more than 270 people died in the crash, making it one of the deadliest aviation disasters in India's history. Immediately after the crash, rescue operations began. The airport suspended all flight operations and emergency teams rushed to the scene. The Indian Prime Minister instructed the Aviation Ministry to provide all necessary support for rescue and investigation efforts. The investigation into the crash was launched by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau with assistance from the US National Transportation Safety Board and British authorities. Both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, commonly known as the black boxes, were recovered from the crash site. The CVR was found on a rooftop on June 13th and the FDR was retrieved from the wreckage on June 16th. Both devices were transported under heavy security to the AAIB laboratory in Delhi on June 24th, where data extraction began the same evening with technical experts from India and the US present. The analysis of the black box data is ongoing. Investigators hope to reconstruct the exact sequence of events, understand why the engines lost thrust, and determine whether technical, mechanical, or human errors played a role. The black box data is crucial because it records everything from engine performance and altitude to cockpit conversations in the final moments before the crash. Early reports and eyewitnesses' video suggest that the landing gear remained extended throughout the takeoff, which would have increased drag and made it harder for the plane to climb. Investigators are looking into whether this was due to a technical malfunction or a pilot oversight. The weather was hot, which can reduce lift, but it should not have caused a total loss of thrust. The pilot's Mayday call indicated that both engines lost power, which is extremely rare in modern aviation. Possible causes being considered include mechanical failure, contaminated fuel, or bird ingestion. But all engines failing at once is almost unheard of. This was not the first time that this particular Boeing 787 Dreamliner had faced problems. 4 years earlier, in November 2021, the same aircraft had to make an emergency landing in Turkey due to a fuel leak while flying from London to Hyderabad. There have also been reports from Boeing factory workers about quality control issues during the manufacturing of Dreamliners. Some employees claimed that faulty parts were used, and sometimes metal shavings and other debris were left inside the planes. Workers said they were pressured not to report these violations. Even a quality manager at the factory reportedly told his wife he would never travel on a Dreamliner. Between 2012 and 2013, 11 planes were delivered from the factory that were so poorly made that a supervisor said she could not sleep at night. After the crash, 2 former senior Air India cabin crew members wrote a letter to the Prime Minister claiming that the accident was a tragedy waiting to happen. They said that safety warnings about Boeing 787 jets were ignored by both Air India and the Directorate General of Civil Aviation. The ex-crew members stated that they were fired after raising concerns about technical defects in the Dreamliner aircraft, and they accused the airline and regulator of suppressing these issues. They demanded a full investigation, alleging that a cover-up had compromised passenger safety. In one incident in May 2024, a Dreamliner flying from Mumbai to London had a critical emergency slide malfunction after landing. The cabin crew reported the issue, but they were allegedly pressured to change their statements and were later terminated when they refused. Air India responded by saying the crew members were dismissed for misconduct and for providing false information, but the ex-crew members insist their only concern was passenger safety. One of the most critical clues in the investigation is the deployment of the ram air turbine, or RAT. The RAT is a small propeller-like device that automatically deploys when there is a total loss of electrical, hydraulic, or engine power. Its purpose is to generate emergency power to keep essential systems running long enough for the pilots to attempt an emergency landing. In this crash, the high-pitched sound of the RAT was clearly heard in videos, and its deployment was visible, indicating that the aircraft suffered a complete loss of power from both engines or a total electrical failure within seconds of takeoff. There are several possible reasons why the RAT would deploy so soon after takeoff. The 3 main scenarios are as follows. One possibility is a dual engine failure, which means both engines stop producing thrust at the same time. Another is a total electrical failure, where the main electrical systems of the aircraft stop working entirely. And the third, though less likely, is a hydraulic failure, as it typically does not lead to both engines failing at once. Dual engine failure is extremely rare in modern aviation. In the last 70 years, there have only been about 7 reported cases of both engines failing at the same time on commercial jets. For both engines to fail within 30 seconds of takeoff is almost unheard of. Some experts suggested that a bird strike could have caused both engines to fail, but this is unlikely because there were no signs of birds, fire, or sparks in the engine area, and it is very rare for birds to hit both engines simultaneously. Another theory is fuel contamination. If contaminated fuel was loaded onto the aircraft, it could cause both engines to lose power. But aviation fuel is tested multiple times before being loaded onto an aircraft. The fuel supplier checks it, airline engineers check it, and the fuel trucks have automatic systems to detect contamination. If contaminated fuel was the cause, it would be a major act of negligence or even sabotage, as other planes fueled from the same source would also be at risk. Some experts have pointed to the possibility of a total electrical failure. The Boeing 787 relies heavily on advanced electronic systems, including variable frequency starter generators that provide electrical power to start and control the engines. If these systems fail, the electronic engine controls can stop working, even if the engines themselves are still running. In such a case, the pilots would not be able to control the thrust and the aircraft would lose power. The auxiliary power unit is a backup, but it can take up to 90 seconds to start, and in this crash, the plane did not have that much time. Mechanical error or manufacturing defects are also being investigated. The aircraft that crashed had a history of technical problems. In November 2021, it suffered a fuel leak mid-flight and had to make an emergency landing. It also had issues with the windshield and battery overheating, which have been problems in other Dreamliners as well. The right engine was replaced in March 2025 and the left engine was last serviced in 2023, with its next inspection scheduled for December 2025. Both engines had clean maintenance histories, but investigators are looking at whether there was a hidden defect or maintenance oversight. The Dreamliner itself has faced many safety questions since its introduction. In 2013, all Boeing 787s were grounded worldwide due to battery fires caused by manufacturing defects. In 2020, Norwegian Airlines had to stop flying some Dreamliners and even scrapped one after only 10 years due to engine problems. Employees at Boeing's Charleston factory have repeatedly raised concerns about poor quality control, faulty parts, and assembly shortcuts. Some whistleblowers claim that Dreamliners delivered to Air India between 2012 and 2014 had serious quality issues, and the plane that crashed was delivered during this period. The investigation is also looking at Air India's maintenance practices. Most of Air India's Dreamliners are maintained by Air India Engineering Services Limited, a government company. There have been reports of poor maintenance, fake audit reports, and overworked pilots. In May 2024, 300 Air India Express crew members went on mass sick leave, complaining about fatigue and working conditions. The crash investigation is being led by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, with help from international experts. The black box was recovered and is being analyzed. According to international rules, a preliminary report must be published within 30 days, and a final report should be completed within a year. The early findings suggest that the most likely cause of the crash was a sudden and total loss of power, either from both engines or from the main electrical system. The deployment of the RAT, the lack of engine noise, and the Mayday call reporting no thrust all point to this scenario. The aircraft did not reach the minimum altitude needed to turn back or to make full use of RAT's emergency power. The pilots had less than 30 seconds to react, and there was simply not enough time or altitude to recover. So, the deployment of the RAT suggests that the aircraft experienced a very serious emergency. This could be the result of both engines failing at the same time, a major electrical failure, or a combination of both. When the RAT is deployed, it means that all the main and backup sources of power have stopped working, and the plane is now relying on this last resort system. In the case of the Air India Flight 171 crash, the fact that the RAT was seen and heard in videos means that the pilots lost their main sources of power almost immediately after takeoff. This is extremely rare and very dangerous, especially at low altitude and low speed. The rat can only help if the plane is moving fast enough and is high enough for the pilots to have time to react. In this accident, the aircraft was not high or fast enough for the rat to make a difference, and the pilots had less than 30 seconds to try to save the plane. Also this week, the last body from the crash was finally identified, marking the end of a painful wait for many families. The deceased was a resident from Cooch, Gujarat, and his body was handed over to his relatives late on Saturday night. This crash has left hundreds of families in pain. Even though the last body has now been identified, the grief and trauma will continue for a long time. Now, before you leave, just don't forget to comment down your thoughts on this situation. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well.